Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar news update video. This is going to be my thoughts, basically what I'm going over what happened at the New York Comic Con 2016 Dark Horse Avatar and Korra panel. Getting straight into it, it really wasn't that great news-wise. The reports that I've heard from the people who did the podcast with me, Kelly and Greg, who were both at New York Comic Con this year, were that they enjoyed the panel. It seemed fun. The videos I've seen from the panel, it seemed like they had a good time. The panel was Janet Varney and then two Dark Horse people plus another Dark Horse person moderating the panel. So Janet Varney, it seems like, made it really fun, being the one behind most of the interaction with the fans. But the panel seemed a little bit restricted just because they didn't have the correct people there to be really delivering the information, because while I think one of the persons on the panel was involved enough with the comics that they knew what they were talking about, they weren't Mike writing the story. It wasn't an introduction to Irene Coe, our new artist. It wasn't an introduction to the cover artist or anyone like that. Gene Yang wasn't there. So we didn't really have the people to get those extra little tidbits of information, because obviously the announcement of the reveal of Turf Wars has already happened. We already know what the name of the Korra comic is and the basic details. So they didn't really have a lot extra to show. So when it comes down to it, there are only really two notable things that happened at the panel. One, they announced the Legend of Korra coloring book, the follow-up to this book, obviously, the Avatar coloring book. They announced the follow-up one coming in July 2017, the month after the first Korra comic comes out. So that was fine, that's cool. They talked a little bit about, same artist, Jed Henry. They mentioned they had a list of some of the pieces of art they were going to have, like the romance moment from book one, Korra kissing Mako Bolin in the background, Zahir killing the Earth Queen, moments like that, the big moments. They kind of highlighted that those ones were going to be covered in it. They did, obviously mention that this is recently released. They mentioned the Korra poster collection. They mentioned North and South Part 1 being out, and went over the release dates for North and South Part 2 and 3 again. Again, nothing really new here. The only notable thing about North and South, they said, was that the original working title for North and South, before the North and South title was decided on, was that it was going to be called Oil and Water, which very much gives us a hint as to what the actual plot going forward is going to be about. What we see on the Part 2 cover very much now seems to be almost confirmed to be a kind of oil drilling kind of tower, kind of platform type situation. And Toph, coming here on behalf of the Earth and Fire Refinery, her father's company, very much seems to be that they're going down to the south because of the resources that are down in the south, untapped by the Southerners. So I think that's an interesting little piece of information, but outside of that, they didn't really have a lot to say. On that front, you could tell this is where the panel, they didn't really have all the information put together, in that some of the panelists weren't entirely sure, like, is the coloring book out yet? Is the Korra poster collection out yet? And it's just like, yeah, it is in comic book stores, but the mass market release hasn't happened just yet. They had to get clarification on that. But after that, they basically they touched on the Smoke and Shadow Library Edition, which is out, of course, and then they just went in, what you've all been waiting for, Korra comics. They showed the image we've already seen of the cover, which you can see here. And then basically they just went into, look, the new stuff that they were talking about with regards to the Korra comic is just that they showed some of Irene Coe's art. She's posted a little bit on her Twitter, but this is our first look at actual pages from the comic. We got to see a big double-page spread of Korra and Asami in the spirit world. Really, really nice shot. You can see that one here. Those images come from Kelly, who was at the panel, and she was taking pictures as the panel progressed. So that's that double page spread. They also showed a third page, which was a kind of separate page. It has two panels on it. Seems to happen after that, or like one or two pages after that. So all of this is from the early stages of the comic. You can see, to get a better look at the two panels, you can see the two images for that page here. So yeah, they're really nice as well. I'm overall pretty impressed with what I've seen so far of Irene Co's art. I liked what we saw of Brittany Williams when she was initially announced as the artist. I am getting behind Irene Co's art. I do wish they had showed some of it colored. We know that Jane Bach is going to be the colorist for these comics. So I do wish we had seen a little bit of that just to kind of show kind of what it looks like completed. But getting a good look at the line work is perfectly fine. Speaking of the whole Brittany Williams thing, the fact that last year she was announced at New York Comic Con last year, she was announced as the core artist, and the release date thing, they did address the fact that there's been a big delay and stuff like that. They didn't say much about it. They basically just said, we were, biding our time, to make sure we got this right, PR speak, basically. No explanation for like why they didn't talk about the comics for a year, why Brittany Williams suddenly doesn't exist in relation to this comic anymore, and just the whole situation just not covered whatsoever. I think they should have addressed it a little bit more, just said something more than what they did say. But what can you really expect them to say? We don't really know the full situation about what happened, but I assume they wouldn't ever really go into the detailed explanation of what exactly went wrong. And they don't want to focus on the negatives when the positive is that the book is coming and they have the creative team down finally. So there's that. Other than that, not a ton else really happened in the panel. They most of the end of the panel, like basically the last half hour, like 20 minutes, half hour, was meant to be Q&As, but they very clearly did it in a way where like it wasn't people coming up to ask questions. They basically asked a question. One person asked Janet Varney, in terms of future like Korra comics, what story would you like to see? She gave her answer, then was just like, oh, I'm going to go out to the audience and ask them what stories they want to see. And they made a big deal about this. And in the videos of the panel, you can see this. Like, Janet Varney spends a good, 20 minutes going around the entire kind of group of people there, every section of the audience, asking a lot of people what stories they want to see covered in Avatar comics. And the answers were basically a little bit of everything. People want to see more about the ATLA characters when they were growing up. They want to see our main characters that we know are dead. How did they die? We want basically exploration of characters who haven't had a focus just yet. Someone mentioned Sakasuki story, a Sakasuki focused story with focusing on the space sword. Other things like that. We got people wanted White Lotus origin story, and just a little bit of everything was covered. It seemed like the person who asked the question, the main person who spoke throughout most of the panel, was writing everything down, and she said she was going to send all this to Mike to like give him this feedback. I don't know if that's going to mean anything, or if this was just meant to be some sort of like, oh, this is really cool fan engagement, but it's not actually going to mean anything, because I can't see this really leading to one specific story, because it covered so much ground. It just to me seems like, oh look, these are the things the fans want to see, and because it's such a general, wide bit of everything, the only way I could see them in any way making anything based off what the fan feedback was basically another Lost Adventures style book, where it's just a collection of stories that cover little bits and ground, bits of story over the course of a big book, like the Avatar Lost Adventures thing, but the entire universe basically of Avatar. I can't see that happening right now. It seemed like the question was initially phrased in a way where what do you want the second Korra graphic novel to cover, rather than just what ended up happening. So that seemed like a lot of fun. Everyone really wanted to say what their kind of idea for a story was, and it seemed like everyone was enjoying that bit, and it's actually quite fun to watch. It's just how much importance do you place on that being most of the panel, and the kind of reflecting on the whole panel. It definitely is very light on content. As I said, Korra Korra coloring book coming. That's a cool new product, and then the three pieces of art that we got from Irene Co. They mentioned a few little tiny tidbits of information about the Korra comics. They did mention that we will see some Julie and Varric stuff in the comic, but not more than that. We know that there is going to be a new villain in the comic. It is a woman, but they didn't say anything more than that. And really, that's about it. They again reiterated the whole idea that Mako and Bolin are going to be up to some like cop stuff, being cops now, working as a team. And other than that, they didn't really cover anything. Oh, one person basically used the whole idea of what do you want to see, stories you want to see in the future, to basically ask a question. They said, will we see Korra and Asami kiss in the comic? And the answer was, I think we can do that, which was basically a way of saying, like, yeah, a kiss is basically planned for the comic, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how or when it's happening. So it seems like very much there's no problem with covering that sort of thing. This relationship is just going to be treated like any other, and that's great to see going forward, that they can just explore this relationship, Korra and Asami, as they need to going forward. And that got a huge reaction when it was brought up. But yeah, I'm just going to end it there before I start repeating myself. That's all there really was at the panel. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on what happened at the panel. Link in the description to a post I wrote for the site, basically where I live updated it with all the updates from the panel. You can find most of the information there. And then also linked in the description will be the video that someone posted of basically the entire panel minus this kind of fan trivia section they did to give away some books in the middle that didn't seem massively important because it was just asking questions. So yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.